the illusion of separateness. Paramahansa Yogananda explains that the ego is the greatest barrier between the soul and God. The ego is a false sense of self, a limited identification with the body, mind, and material existence. Sri Yogananda states, the ego is the soul identified with the body, which causes us to believe we are separate from the divine. This illusion of separateness creates a wall between our consciousness and God's omnipresence. Instead of realizing our infinite nature, we confine ourselves to fleeting identities, our name, status, possessions, and physical form. The ego thrives on pride, attachment, and self-importance, which are fundamentally opposed to the humility and surrender needed for divine realization. Until we let go of this false identification, the soul remains trapped in ignorance, unable to perceive the divine presence within and around us. The distraction of worldly attachments. Sri Yogananda emphasizes that ego blinds us to the love and light of God by anchoring our focus on the external world. He teaches, man's ego is his greatest enemy because it keeps him separated from God. The ego insists on taking credit for all accomplishments, dismissing the divine power behind every success. It drives us to seek validation, status, and material rewards, all of which are transient. This attachment to impermanent things distracts us from the eternal joy of God consciousness. Furthermore, ego fosters negative emotions like jealousy, anger, and greed, pulling us further into the cycle of suffering. To overcome this, Yogananda advises self-discipline, introspection, and devotion, which gradually diminish the ego's hold over the soul. Meditation, the path to ego dissolution. One of Yogananda's key insights is that the ego cannot be destroyed by force or intellectual reasoning alone. It requires sincere love for God and deep meditation to dissolve the ego's grip. He says, the deeper you meditate, the more you will feel your small ego self merging into the sea of divine consciousness. Meditation quiets the restless mind and allows the soul to detach from the ego's constant chatter. In this stillness, one can experience a glimpse of divine unity and understand that the ego is merely a shadow over the soul's true light. Through regular meditation and surrender to God's will, the false sense of separateness begins to fade, and the soul awakens to its true identity as a spark of the divine. The subtle trap of spiritual pride. Sri Yogananda warns that the ego is subtle and cunning, often disguising itself in spiritual pride. Even on the spiritual path, one may fall into the trap of believing they are more advanced or holier than others. He says, spiritual pride is the last and most difficult obstacle to overcome. This egoic arrogance prevents true surrender and keeps the heart closed to God's grace. Yogananda advises seekers to practice humility and selfless service, seeing God in all beings and every situation. By treating others with love and respect, one reduces the ego's dominance and cultivates a sense of oneness with the divine. Liberation through surrender. Ultimately, Sri Yogananda assures us that the dissolution of ego is not a loss but a liberation. He explains, when the soul becomes free from the ego, it merges with God and realizes its infinite nature. Letting go of the ego does not erase individuality, rather, it expands our awareness to encompass the infinite. The soul, free from ego's chains, becomes a clear channel for divine love, wisdom, and bliss. Yogananda's teachings urge us to surrender the illusion of separateness, to meditate deeply, and to cultivate selfless love. In doing so, we realize that our true essence is one with God, and the ego was merely a fleeting shadow blocking the eternal light within.